Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. And today, we're going to try to tackle something kind of different. We're going to look at how to get started speaking English in just 24 hours.
Yeah, that's a really bold idea, right?
Yeah, so we've got this really cool material we're going to look at that lays out a really direct and very unconventional, kind of a radical approach to learning English. And it's definitely not anything like what you would expect in a typical classroom setting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When you first encounter this method, it's just striking how different it is right from the get-go. Instead of spending years on grammar rules, it just throws you straight into the deep end. It's like this rapid immersion experience designed to make you start speaking from day one.
Yeah, I love that. Dive right in.
Yeah.
So in this deep dive, we really want to understand the core principles behind these steps, the practical things that someone who wants to learn to speak English quickly can actually do. And ultimately, we want to think about what you, the listener, can take away from all of this.
Exactly. And I'm sure you might be thinking 24 hours to start speaking. What does that even mean?
Right. Like, are you fluent after 24 hours? No,
Right.
right?
Not at all.
Of course not. But it's about that initial push, overcoming that hesitation we all feel when we try to do something new,
Right. Getting over that hurdle.
especially something like learning a language.
Absolutely.
So let's jump into it. The first step is speak first, worry later. So what's the big idea behind making speaking the top priority right from the beginning?
Well, what I find fascinating is that this method tackles that initial fear and awkwardness head on. Imagine your mouth and tongue are like this lazy cat, as the material says. They need to warm up. And by speaking right away, even if it's just narrating your day or repeating phrases, you jumpstart your vocal mechanics, and more importantly, you start to feel comfortable speaking in English.
Yeah,
Action leads to comfort.
I like that analogy. And it's about breaking down that internal barrier, and the material even encourages you to make mistakes. It says, like, that's sexy, that's how you learn. And that's such a different message than most of us are used to, right?
Absolutely. It's a really empowering reframing to see mistakes not as failures, but as essential feedback. That's incredibly liberating for beginners,
Mm.
especially, I think. And, you know, if you're not afraid to sound a little silly, you're much more likely to just open your mouth and try.
Yeah, just go for it.
And that's when the real learning begins.
All right, so let's say you've spent the first hour, just speaking maybe to yourself, maybe repeating things. What's the next step in this rapid start process?
So hour two is all about the language blanket.
Mhm.
This idea of surrounding yourself with English everywhere you go.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah. And it gives these really concrete examples that I think are really helpful, like switching your phone's language, the settings on your apps, even your YouTube interface, and your alarm clock to English.
So you're saying I wake up and my alarm is in English, everything on my phone is in English.
Exactly. It's about creating this constant exposure to English. So your brain is always processing the language,
Mhm.
even passively. And along with this language blanket, you have the listen, pause, repeat technique using simple sentences like,
Mm.
I'm going to the market today. You listen, you pause, and then you try to repeat it as accurately as possible.
Right, just get those sounds down.
Yeah, and the encouragement, easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
Yeah.
It reinforces the idea that these initial steps are manageable.
Yeah, they're doable.
Exactly.
I love that phrase, easy peasy lemon squeezy.
Yeah.
All right, so we're flooding our senses with English, but we also have these practical, manageable exercises mixed in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So after this language blanket and practicing those phrases, where do we go next?
So hour three gets a bit more strategic.
Mm-hmm.
We focus on mastering the 100 most common words. The idea is that a huge part of everyday communication uses a surprisingly small set of vocabulary.
So it's about mastering the essentials.
Exactly. Words like I, you, go, want, eat, love, these are the building blocks.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense why spend time memorizing complicated words you rarely use when you can start having basic conversations by just knowing the essentials. And I really like how they describe language as being made up of these small pieces. You learn the core words and you start to build this like a castle of confidence.
Yeah, exactly. Like each of these high-frequency words becomes a key that unlocks so many simple sentences, so you quickly start to see what's possible, and that early success really motivates you to keep going.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're speaking, we're immersed in English, we're building that core vocabulary. What comes next in this 24-hour push?
So hour four introduces this really practical writing exercise called Write Like You Talk. And the focus here is on simple and direct expression, just like you would in a casual conversation. The examples they give are things like, today I go gym, or I eat chicken. And what's really interesting is how they explicitly reject perfectionism. They say, perfect is boring, and baby, you're spicy.
That is a memorable way to encourage people to just get their thoughts down. It takes the pressure off. The goal is not to write perfectly grammatically correct sentences. It's just to start forming your thoughts in English on paper, even if it's very basic.
Exactly. It's about developing the habit of writing in English without getting stuck on every grammar rule at this early stage.
Mm.
It's more important to be able to communicate your meaning clearly, even if the grammar isn't perfect.
So we're speaking, listening, reading with all these language changes. And now, basic writing, the next step seems to involve actually using our voice to connect with others, right?
Yes, hour 5 is all about find a voice buddy.
Yeah.
This step encourages you to practice speaking with others and to get feedback. And the suggestions are pretty broad, like talking to friends who speak English, finding language partners online, or even just recording yourself speaking.
Recording yourself can be really insightful, even though it might feel weird at first because you hear things that you don't notice when you're just speaking.
Absolutely. And they suggest sending those recordings to someone for feedback, or even just listening back to them yourself to identify areas where you can improve.
Hmm.
And crucially, they emphasize finding your voice. you know,
Yeah.
they highlight that your accent, whether it's British American or anything else, is less important than being able to express yourself authentically. They say, that voice, it's hot. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Like embrace how you sound.
It's about owning it, right? Not trying to sound like someone else.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, as we look at the big picture of this 24-hour approach, what are the key messages about managing expectations and building that all-important self-confidence?
The material is very clear. You won't become fluent in 24 hours. But the main goal is to become fearless, to plant that seed of confidence. And they use this metaphor of your passion being the water that helps the seed grow, which really emphasizes the importance of your own motivation.
I really like how they frame English as a tool and the learner, you, our listener, as the weapon. It's empowering, like language is there to help you achieve your goals.
Exactly. And the repeated calls to action, like speak boldly and love loudly, along with that final message to learn like a cheeky little rebel, create this really energetic and unconventional spirit around language learning.
Yeah.
It's about having this playful and fearless attitude right from the start.
Yeah, it's like throwing out the rule book.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so to summarize this unique method, in 24 hours, you prioritize speaking, you surround yourself with English, you learn the most essential vocabulary first, you start with basic writing, and you actively look for opportunities to speak and get feedback, and all of this while embracing mistakes and focusing on building confidence rather than being perfect.
That's a great summary. It's a very action-oriented way to start learning English, designed to lower those initial barriers and get you actively engaged from day one.
It definitely gives us a fresh perspective, especially for those who might feel intimidated by traditional grammar-heavy approaches.
Yeah.
So as you think about this intense initial dive into English, what do you think some of the long-term benefits and potential challenges might be for starting your language learning journey with such a strong focus on immediate speaking and output rather than a slower approach that focuses on grammar first?
That's a great question, and it's worth considering. Is this initial development of fearlessness truly the most important element in those first steps of learning a new language?
It's something to think about.
Yeah, it really is.
So thanks for joining us on the deep dive today.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.